Hi there YouTube, I'm here in Brayton Park again. It's quite nice now. It chucked it down for a couple of hours this afternoon, so a lot of the paths are flooded like that. So this is actually a bridleway where the horses go. There's no horses out today. As you can see, it's full of water. But it's quite nice now. The rain stopped and it's all right. But I'm thinking about psychophysics. Because I've been thinking a lot about physics recently in relation to this free will, quantum mechanics, determinism, Newtonianism, is the mind Newtonian, all that kind of stuff. But that's got me thinking about psychophysics. I suppose I was specifically prompted to think about that with a comment that a user called Girly Voice made on one of my videos. So thanks for that prompt, very useful. Psychophysics, I looked into psychophysics a few years ago actually when I was doing some research in this area, and it is fascinating. The term originates, I'm pretty sure, with Gustav Fechner, who's a 19th century scientist, I guess. This is the guy who also came up with panpsychism, the term panpsychism, which is very related to it actually, because his main squeeze, his topic of research, was the relationship between the physical world, as described by physics, and psychology, the life of the mind and the activity of the psyche. So he was interested in exploring the relationships between psyche and the physical world, hence psychophysics. I think he was quite ahead of his time in that regard now. It's pretty, it's quite a de rigueur topic these days. There's a lot of stuff going on about that now, but in the 19th century that was pretty out there stuff. And his ideas did come across as being pretty out there, I think. I mean, this thing I've talked about before, panpsychism, was one of his answers to that kind of problem. What is the relationship between psyche and physical world? And one of his solutions, that was this panpsychism thing, that psychology, mind, is a kind of natural property of the world itself, just like space is or time is. You'd also get mind, and it's just kind of out there, a natural part of the world, which our brains form a particularly kind of tangled knot of that stuff, just because they're so complex and so tangled, I guess. So that was one of his responses to that. It's fascinating stuff the way he talks about it, actually. He talked about the night world and the day world, and how we walk around in what he called the day world. I think that's right. Which everything's brightly lit, you know what I mean? Because it's got mind in it, is this way he thinks about it. You know what I mean? So it feels kind of slightly illuminated. And the night world is the world of the inanimate. Not quite sure how that works out. It's fascinating stuff. But anyway, that's not what I want to talk about right now. I'm interested in this other thing he had, which is psychophysics, which is like the research project which linked to the idea of panpsychism. So, if he's looking at the relationship, as I say, between psyche and the physical world, what he was trying to do was to measure that relationship, or identify that relationship as closely as possible. That's what he was after. And it still carries on. There still is a branch of science called psychophysics. But what it tends to involve these days, in the same spirit as Fechner, is measuring thresholds and identifying the particular bandwidth of the physical world that our psyche intersects with. So a typical research project in psychophysics would be to measure the highest note that a person can hear. A bit like when you get your ears tested as a kid, they play high notes, don't they? So you would measure the highest note that a person can hear, and kind of where you can hear it, because you hear high notes in a different place than low notes. And similarly with the lowest note a person can detect. And again, you would hear that in different places. You don't always hear it in your ears. Low notes you hear in your stomach or in your shins and different places. So you would set it's kind of you're setting the limits. And a lot of those limits vary from person to person, of course. Some people got better hearing than others. In general, there's a fairly average span of, in this particular dimension of hearing that a person can hear, wavelengths of sound you can hear. And you do similar things with other kinds of thresholds. So the shortest period of time that a stimulus can be in front of you, and you still be aware of it. So you might test that by having a screen which just flashes an image up for a certain number of milliseconds, and when the number of milliseconds is small enough, whatever it may be, 30 milliseconds or something, then it's too brief and you can't detect it consciously. So that would be another threshold limit. You know, and there's just loads of them, you know, to do with hearing and touch and smell, and they're all engaging with the senses in different ways. Balance. So they all set these usually upper and lower limits for the as I say, this kind of bandwidth of connection that our psyche has with the physical world. You know, knowing that all those dimensions extend beyond that, and then there's other dimensions that are existing in the physical world that our senses don't engage with at all, and so lie outside of the whole psychophysics project. So X-rays, for example, you never detect X-rays, no matter how loud, in inverted commas, they are. Yeah, psychophysics. I mean, I guess the image I have of that is this an imaginary shape. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of imagining all these dimensions that you're measuring human sensitivity in. You know, like loudness or tone or brevity of a stimulus. All these different dimensions that you're measuring it in, and each of those is a kind of extension. So you put all these together and you get like this weird multifaceted shape which represents the shape of the human sensorium. You know, our ability to hear sounds is this long in this dimension. Our ability to detect motion is kind of this distance. You know, all those different sensory engagements all have their span and their range. And their range is, when plotted in multidimensional space, gives you this kind of shape, which, as I say, is the shape of the human sensorium. And it's that kind of shape I kind of visualize as wandering around in this weird abstract world of physics, which has got all these other dimensions and extends in all these dimensions in far different and far greater extents. You know what I mean? So you've got this weird, like, multifaceted diamond thing bumbling around in this huge domain of physics. And yeah, that's just my visualization of that. Psychophysics, fascinating area.